what we've seen in the last year is reinforcing the view that they are not as capable as we thought they were, and that we shouldn't be afraid of them in terms of engaging with NATO. There's also alongside that a view that this thing has gone on long enough. It needs to be brought to some sort of conclusion. And because Ukraine are doing so well, we can now give them some other systems, as we said earlier on, that would enable them to do that.
Mm.
Now,
All right. Now let's talk about the fighting and the equipment that's being made available to Ukrainian soldiers now. We've been talking a lot over the last couple of days about Britain, among other countries, but Britain in particular, now sending European battle tanks, the Challenger 2, to Ukraine. Not many. I've heard the number 10 mentioned, a squadron of battle tanks. Significance of that from your point of view, Tim?
well, it's significant in that there is definitely, obviously, a change of heart and a change of policy. Right from the very beginning of this, one of the big issues is ensuring that we, NATO, and therefore UK, US, and the rest of us in NATO, do not end up by fighting a war with Russia. And that's always constrained the thinking, in my view, rightly, about how much we support and what sort of support we should give to the Ukrainians. Now, a year on, there's no doubt at all that Ukraine is doing, wonderfully well, and that people want to try and ensure that not just that they're not defeated, but give them greater combat power in offensive operations to continue to regain lost territory. So there's definitely a change of heart here. Now, deploying Challenger 2 it's a very capable tank. It is, very highly maneuverable, good firepower, and great protection. It is a very capable system alongside other European tanks like the Leopard, which has obviously been spoken about as well. Part of the problem here, though, and you'd expect me from a logistic perspective to mention this, deploying 10 tanks. First of all, people have got to be trained into using them, how to drive them, fight them, and so forth. Secondly, they have to be sustained and logistically sustained and maintained in terms of spares and servicing and all that sort of stuff. And main battle tanks are notoriously difficult to keep on the road. I won't dwell on some stories I could share, but keeping that lot on the road is not going to be easy. And if you end up with the Ukrainian military, as is a real danger of happening, that they end up with small numbers of lots of different variants of armored fighting vehicles of one sort or another, be they infantry vehicles or main battle tanks, that issue of logistic sustainability is a big issue.
Yes.
A big issue.
Yeah. Now, look, the calculation early on, as you say, Tim, has been a reluctance on the part of NATO political leaders to be drawn into any kind of direct conflict with Russia. Can obviously see where that's an important calculation. Has that calculation changed now after all of the months of fighting? We have seen the fragility of Russian military power. It is weaker than we imagined it was at the beginning of this conflict. Do we assume that Russia, in the light of that, because they've learned lessons too about their own strength, would be correspondingly more reluctant to engage with NATO, which is a vastly more powerful military force than the Russian military, and therefore we need worry less about being dragged into a conflict of the kind that we're talking about?
Yeah, there's definitely a line of thought that would reinforce that. I think, I may have said to you before on your program, back in the Cold War days, we saw the Warsaw Pact and the Russians in particular as a highly capable organization. And we'd seen how they'd fought at the end of World War II and so forth, taking places like Berlin, etc. What we've seen in the last year is reinforcing the view that they are not as capable as we thought they were, and that we shouldn't be afraid of them in terms of engaging with NATO. There's also alongside that a view that this thing has gone on long enough. It needs to be brought to some sort of conclusion. And because Ukraine are doing so well, we can now give them some other systems, as we said earlier on, that would enable them to do that. Now, there's a danger in this. I mean, as a hardline chap from Moscow today has said, Russia now sees itself not at war in Ukraine, but at war with the US and the UK. And they have not fully mobilized their forces. They have got clearly capabilities, particularly in the nuclear field and other areas too. So I don't want to dismiss the danger of ending up with some sort of conflict with Russia from a NATO perspective. We do not want this theatre of operation enlarged. We do not want to find ourselves fighting in the places like the Baltics or elsewhere. Now, what that hardline Russian perspective is all about is another issue. But partly, I think, it's about winning the internal PR, if you like, Any dictatorship, of course, when it's under threat, when things are going badly wrong, wants to create an external threat. And I think internally within Russia, there will be a view that we need to preach the line that this is about America, it's about the UK, it's about NATO, it's about the West wanting to break up Russia and ensure that Russia it doesn't hold on to what it is fully entitled to hold on to. So there's a whole raft of issues going on here, and like most of these debates, there's no clear, single answer to it. I think sending challenges good. I happen to believe that supporting Ukraine is really important, and in the US there's been some pushback against that. There's talk of the new speaker, agreeing to reduce the amount of aid and so forth. I think we have to be robust. I'm certainly not against sending heavy metal, with the caveats that I've made upon. But we must not dismiss and take lightly the dangers that are still there on the table.
How far is it possible, Tim, to prepare volunteers who work in an area like that for what they're about to face and the risks they're about to take?
Well, the truth is, it isn't easy. I have quite a lot of background, actually, in the humanitarian world. My brigade built and ran refugee camps in Kosovo, and I did quite a lot of work with humanitarian organizations since then. And the first thing to say is these guys are, they're good people, they're brave people, they're prepared to go and work in very dangerous areas, and they obviously passionately believe in what it is they're trying to do, and we should applaud that. Mm-hmm. They're not military. I should say, I don't know who they are, frankly. I mean, I've not heard of them before, obviously, but they may be ex-military, I don't know. And quite a lot of ex-military, interestingly, do go into the humanitarian world.
Yes.
Nonetheless, we don't train humanitarians in terms of obviously how to engage in combat. There are courses that are run, indeed, for the BBC and others, on how to survive in a war zone, and how to deal with wounds and all that sort of stuff. But I think these guys will be, frankly, probably ordinary guys, untrained, who are just getting out there doing what they believe in, and we should give them credit for that, but also be a bit fearful if they have been captured.
Yeah, I mean, I've attended one or two of those hostile environment courses myself in my time. I mean, who knows how one reacts at the heat of a hotspot of the kind that we're talking about here. I mean, you take your hat off to these volunteers. You've worked with them, Tim. Do you feel the same way about those others who go to Ukraine to fight? In many cases, no doubt motivated by the best possible motives. How do you feel, though, about those people?
Well, if I'm honest, I have less, sympathy might not be the right word, but I don't feel the same way about them. I think engaging in warfare is the business of, in simple terms, professional soldiers. I mean, I didn't get up in the morning and decide that I want to go and get involved in the first or second Gulf Wars or the Balkans or Kosovo or whatever. I'm part of a professional military under a sovereign elected government who decide what and where we will go and get involved with.
Yes.
And once we have individual people deciding what it is they're going to engage with, there are obvious dangers to that. So the truth is, I don't applaud it. I understand it. I can understand why people might want to engage with it because they feel pretty strongly about it. But I don't think overall, I don't think it's helpful.